whatever you need. We are excited to welcome Katie Moses. She is our moderator she is our presenter for this session. Katie is a Des Moines, Iowa native, and she has an undergraduate degree in human development and family studies. She also has a master's degree in training and development. She currently works full-time as an instructional designer and a learning consultant for an insurance company, and part-time as a local keynote speaker. Her short-term future goal is to get her PhD in learning and performance related topic. And in her free time, she enjoys being outside gardening and hiking or inside snuggling her dog. So with that, I just wanted to say welcome to you, Katie, and thanks for being with us today. We will do about 15 minutes at the end of the session for questions. So Katie, go ahead and take it away, and then I will jump back in at that time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nina. I'm really excited to be here, everyone. Thanks for coming to my session. As Nina so well introduced me, my name's Katie Moses, and welcome everyone for coming to my Facilitating in a Virtual World session. We're going to talk about facilitating virtually. And as Nina said, I'm a learning and performance specialist. I work at a local insurance company here in Des Moines, and I also do some learning design development for a local keynote speaker that's here in Iowa as well, and some other local companies in the area, and I develop their training. So like many of you during the pandemic, I've had to also transition my job from being in the office to being 100% virtual. And while I actually do design virtual training for a living, it was still pretty tricky for me to make that transition. So my hope for you today is that you're going to pick up some quick tips for better facilitation when you're trying to work in the same environment. So can you all give me a quick thumbs up? I just want to make sure which screens you're seeing. So if you can see my big PowerPoint screen and hear me, give me a thumbs up or raise your hand.
I can see it,
awesome.
And they probably can't tell you actually the way that we have it set up. They can probably tell you in the chat. So
yeah, I'm seeing all the hand raises, so that
okay,
works perfect. Yeah, awesome. Perfect. So here we go. So as Nina said, I have a master's in leadership development that I got from here, Drake University here in Des Moines, and this has really helped me transition from working in youth education into corporate learning. I used to work in summer camp programs and challenge course team building programs, primarily with kids, and then I made that transition to adult learning through my master's program. And the best thing I learned during that program was that there's really no difference in how we train youth and how we train kids. And now there are a lot of principles to teaching, but you're here today to specifically learn about things you can implement in your virtual classroom. So we're going to discuss just a couple of those learning principles to get us started that I want you to keep in mind while you're designing your classroom. And these might feel pretty familiar to you. And luckily, like I mentioned, it's not really too different from teaching kids to adults. So whether you're working with an adult classroom or you're working with kids, or even if you have kids at home, these should still be some pretty good tips. So our first one is that attention spans are short regardless of age. Put yourself into the shoes of your learners and think about how exhausting it might be to sit, listen, and stare at a screen for an hour. Sounds pretty boring, right? If you've been here at the conference for the day, you might be starting to settle into some virtual environment fatigue, and that's totally normal and fine. And so when we're designing these sessions as the learning designers, and we want to keep the attention of our learners, we like to change up the activities on the screen every few minutes, roughly about like 3 to 5 minutes. The more you can change up your screen, the better. And you can do this a lot of different ways. You can do it by not revealing all of your bullet points immediately. You can use a variety of slide designs and bright colors, or you can use pictures. There are a lot of different options. Have you ever been in a class where the facilitator made you research the content and then teach it back to the class? This is called a teach back, and this is a teaching method that we use to get you to engage in the content by asking you to teach yourself and then teach it back to the class or teach it back to a partner. We often remember things more easily when we have to teach that concept to someone else, and you can do this in virtual classrooms by using breakout rooms or small groups. And just like with kids, the more fun you can make the content, the better. Gamification is a great way for learners to practice a skill in a safe environment that can also be fun. It might feel like adding a game element to your content will make it too silly or maybe distracting, but when you can do it well, your learners may retain even more and actually have fun doing it. So once you've developed your learning, it's time to think about the delivery. And in this case, we're talking about virtual delivery. So there are 3 things that we're going to think about as we go through this session. We're going to think about virtual activities, slide design, and facilitator prep. So like I mentioned at the top of this presentation, we always want our content to be engaging, but this is especially true with a virtual class. There are a variety of environmental factors that are distracting on the learner side of the screen. These could be household members, pets, maybe a TV in the background, mobile phones, sunshine outside their window, or any multitude of things. You might even be experiencing this as a facilitator. And often my dog is actually sitting behind me on the bed watching my screen move around or watching my peers in a meeting that I'm on. There's also a couple of windows right in front of me. And so he really likes to look out those while I'm on meetings. And those are all distractions for all of us. So what are some of the classroom activities that you've maybe done in your virtual classroom or you've experienced? If you can use the chat, type some of those in. Okay, it looks like we're seeing a couple polls, facilitating applied improv games for social learning, changing the virtual background. That's a lot of fun. I just advanced my bullet points too far scrolling. Excellent. These are all really great activities. So some of us have been in some virtual rooms before. Hopefully you'll find some new tricks in here. There are a lot of different things that you can incorporate into your virtual classrooms that you would have also done in a live classroom. So don't be afraid to just modify those activities so that they fit. So here's another one that we can incorporate. We just did it via chat, discussion, right? So if we were able to be off of mute, we could have had that discussion where you're just popping yourself off of mute and then just shouting out your answer to the larger group. Chat works fantastic. At work, we use Microsoft Teams quite a bit, and sometimes we'll incorporate that into our team meetings or if we're having some informal sessions, and we'll have people like pop up a GIF or a meme for their reactions for different situations we're talking about, and it's a lot of fun and a really great way to engage people. So this is another great way for engaging your learners in the learning as well, having them actually participate in discussion. And it's a great way to kind of crowd share like we just did here about our different experiences so that you can draw from other people's experiences that are also in the class and start engaging them to connect together. So what about games? So here's one that you can incorporate in to your PowerPoints or any other virtual sessions. Games are a great way to incorporate some fun into your learning. We use Kahoot a lot at my full-time job. Kahoots have free accounts, but also have paid accounts that like have all these fantastic features. The free ones are just fine as well. But it's a great way to engage your learners and because they're free, it's really accessible to a lot of us. Kahoot is a quiz platform, if you're unfamiliar, that participants can access from their smartphones, and you can build your own icebreakers, fun little breaks, or you can build knowledge checks and choose from a pre-created template that you just pop your questions into. They're really quick and easy, and free accounts do exist. So I'd like us to try a Kahoot now. You're going to go to kahoot.it, and I'm going to pop up a different screen onto what you can see, and you'll get the code to share. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And here we go. So what you should see is you should be able to see my Kahoot screen. And up at the top, we have a game pin. And you're inside of this www.kahoot.it. Or I guess there's not a .com at the end. You're going to enter this game pin. Oh no, it says that I have to upgrade to allow more players to join. So sorry, guys. We've got 3 people who are in here. I didn't realize there was a limit on it. So Jamie, Beth, and Lisa will get to play. You guys can kind of see what's going on, hopefully. So I put together this little quiz on virtual facilitation. So you guys can see this on the screen, and then our 3 who got in will be able to answer these questions from their mobile devices or their computers. You can also set a timer on this. I've set it kind of quick so that we can get the like general feel of what's happening, and you can see how it works a little bit. And I've also got it set on an auto timer, so it'll switch the slides for me, and I don't really have to think about it. Excellent. Games will make my class seem too silly. False. Lots of people like to have games in their class. Beth is racking up the points over there. The next question is, you can engage learners by structuring content in what ways? We've got about 5 seconds left. Yeah, so short chunks are a great way to break up your content, especially in virtual learning. Have lots of breaks and switch that content often. How frequently should you change slides? I talked about this a little bit earlier. Excellent. We've got quick questions coming in. Yep, every 3 minutes. That's how frequently you want to try to change up your slides. I'm not always good about that. I tend to talk a little too long, but that's a good timeline to keep in mind. And then teach backs are what? Which one would you associate with a teach back? Awesome. Effective teaching others is a great way to learn. Great job. Those of you who are able to get in here. Beth, fantastic job winning all those points. Thank you guys for just jumping into that really quick. So that's just a fun way that you can incorporate some games in. I used it as a quick little retention activity or reinforcement activity. If you noticed, I included some concepts that we've already talked about. and reinforce some of the thoughts that I've mentioned so far in the presentation. There are also like lots of pre-designed ones that are in there, like Disney themed, sports themed, and all that stuff that are pre-set up that you can choose if you just want a fun icebreaker. So something to think about. And it's kind of fun to get people engaged in competition. So if you have a group that's really into competing against each other for points, it can be really engaging. So our last bullet point for virtual activities is breakout rooms. And breakout rooms are a great way to incorporate group work and teachbacks into your classroom. Zoom, WebEx, and Adobe Connect, and there are some others out there that will do breakout rooms as well. And you can place users into those rooms so that they can go off and have smaller group discussions. They can do some group work. They can put together those teachbacks that we talked about. And you as a facilitator are able to jump between all of those rooms to pop in, make sure folks are on task, make sure that there aren't any questions, and make sure that people still stay engaged. You can also insert the directions for what you want them to do into the chat, so that they can pull those back up and make sure that they still know what the ask is that they're supposed to be doing once they get out into that room. So our next topic is slide design, and this seems maybe like a no-brainer. Make your slides interesting, but not too interesting, not too bright, not too dark, but there are a few other things you can do to keep your slides really interesting and engaging. Hopefully, like this presentation, you can use a nice slide design that has some fun color. This is actually a slide design that I just grabbed out of Microsoft PowerPoint. I didn't create this on my own. It's just a free one that was in there, and I used the slide design tool that feature that annoyingly like pops up every time you're in PowerPoint. And so this is all basically pre-created for me, and I just added my text, and it was a really quick, easy way to get these PowerPoint slides done. When I'm at any of my other jobs, whether it's some of my clients that I work with or at my full-time job, I typically have a template that I have to stick with very rigidly, with a set color scheme and different slide styles and everything. And I think it's funny I got out here into an area where I could kind of create my own, and I went straight to a template. So no shame in using a template to put together your stuff if you can. We want to keep our text on the slide to a minimum. If you've noticed throughout this presentation, there's not a whole lot of text on the slide. If you're going to read it out loud, it doesn't need to be on the screen, is kind of the rule of thumb. Our learners can read for themselves. So instead, what we want to focus on is putting up a slide title that will help, once you flip it up, encourage some curiosity. You can include short sentences or abbreviated bullet points, and then you go in and verbally explain and describe the concepts that go along with each of those. Additionally, we want to avoid cramming too much content onto a single slide. Breaking up will, one, make it a lot easier for your learners to digest, but also it'll keep your slides moving at a pace that keeps your learners engaged. So if you've noticed, I've kept each of these to being pretty short, and then we quickly flip through each of these slides, and I have them changing up pretty frequently. So the next part here is you can also use a photo in your slide design instead of just using words on your screen like a traditional PowerPoint. You want to make sure that your photo has something to do with teaching your learners about the concept that you're teaching. You can even turn it into an activity by having learners use an annotation tool to pick out things in the photo. So we're going to try that now in this session. If you can use the annotation tool within Zoom, that's great, or you can point some things out in chat. This is a picture of me facilitating in my guest room office space. And I want you to circle or highlight or type in chat some of the things that you find in this photo that are not excellent for facilitating a class. Think of things that might be distracting to your learners or that might be a problem when you're facilitating. Oops, sorry, I've clicked on the screen. There you go. So take a minute, analyze my photo, and call out some things or highlight what you think might be a problem here. All right, these are really great responses. You guys are totally picking it up. Yes. A lot of the space in here is very distracting. My dog is in there. You can see all the junk in my closet. There's just a lot of things happening in the background. And even though when you're presenting, you want to think that your learners are going to be like solely engaged on you the whole time, but that's not true. Like I find myself in meetings with my peers all the time, like peering into their space if they don't have like a background up and seeing like, oh, that's interesting behind you. What's going on? Yeah, dogs are always distracting. Tiber is my dog's name, and I have a peer on meetings that if he is here during the meeting, she always likes to talk to him a little bit before we get started. So that's a lot of stuff to think about when you're facilitating. So that brings us into facilitator prep, and how you can prep yourself in your environment for facilitating is incredibly important. So you found a lot of things on that last slide that look like hazards of productive facilitation. You guys did a really good job. And just like you want to have the best environment for your learners, you want to make the best environment for yourself as well. As hopefully you've noticed, I've cleaned up this space quite a bit. There's still like a bed behind me. This is kind of the space that I have available to me during this pandemic. I've still got like pictures up on the wall. My master's certificate is back there behind me. I try to keep my dog out of the room as much as possible, and those sorts of things I try to do to keep my space as ready for people to focus as possible. So another thing to think about with preparing for yourself is to make sure that you have good lighting so that your audience can see you, because being able to see your face and read your facial reactions, if they are able to see, is a really great way to keep them engaged. You want to watch for light blowouts, like so I've got a window in front of me and some curtains that I keep kind of pulled back depending on the day, but you can see how my face brightened up quite a bit. And when it's really sunny outside and we don't have quite such a dreary day here in Iowa, sometimes that sunlight coming in or even the indirect light can shine on my face so bright that you can't see any of my facial features at all. And it can be really hard to see me. I look like a ghost on the screen. So I pull those back. I make sure that I have my lights on if needed to make sure that the opposite doesn't happen where the room's so dark that you can't see me either. I also have a second monitor here at my office desk. And I use this through meetings and facilitating and anything, even if I'm not sharing my screen. It just makes life so much easier. So getting a second screen and setting it up so you can spread your facilitator notes out. I had, when I've asked you guys to do chat, I've pulled up the chat window so that it's out of my way. I've got our little like webcam window up here in the corner. I've got the actual presentation off on the other screen, and I've got my facilitator notes right here in front of me so that I can see all of it, and I can very easily move back and forth between things without too much mess happening and fiddling around. So that's something that's been really helpful for me. And then the room that you're in is also really important. So we talked a little bit about my space and what the difference is between that photo that I showed you and the things that I do to clean up my space a little bit when I'm facilitating in here. You don't want too much going on in the room you're in, or at least like directly behind you. You don't want to be in a room where there's too much echo, or maybe the same room that your family members are doing virtual school or also on virtual calls, and where they can come in. I am like still really crossing my fingers, and I have a wood desk here, so knock on wood that my dog doesn't come in and start barking throughout my house, which like 95% of the time happens anytime I'm on a call, but he's being pretty good right now. That sort of stuff happens all the time, right? So the best thing you can do is just, do your best and try to work through some of those things. But just like this room, like I know some of you pointed out that like the bedspread has too many patterns on it, or there's too much. Like there's not a whole lot we can always do for that stuff, right? Like you may not be able to go out and like redecorate your room or buy new bedspreads so that you can virtually facilitate from your guest room office, right? So just be kind to yourself. Your learners are going through the same thing, and recognize that like you're just doing the best you can, and that's all of us can ask for. So we're coming to the end of the presentation. We're going to have a good amount of time for questions, and if you want to go back and see some things, we can do that. Or if you really want to dive into some of these different concepts, we can do that as well. If you can, in the chat, tell me what was your favorite tip today, and what are you going to implement right away? Keep it simple. That's a great one. Incorporate more games. Excellent. Yeah, Kahoot is really great, Jamie. It's very customizable and accessible to learners. Never be afraid to incorporate more fun, Penny. We learn best when we can tie back in some fun things into our learning that make it easier for people to recall later. Absolutely, changing up the slides often to engage your audience, Bethany. That's great. I also will sometimes use my dog as a prop, just like I did for that photo, except funny enough, I had to bribe him to actually be in that photo when normally I can't get him out of the room, off the bed. I actually had to bribe him to lay there for me for a couple of seconds so I could take that picture. Something else to think about that I didn't highlight in this presentation while you guys are thinking about that. Ooh, good question, Annette, on the virtual background. So I'll talk about that too. In that picture, this might be part of the like bright and like detailed or extra crazy visuals and designs in that photo, but I was wearing like a super casual tie-dye t-shirt in that photo. And I wanted to be sure to call out that and this might be different in your learning environments, but it's always good to carry over your professionalism in your virtual facilitation, just like you would in the workplace as well. Make sure that, you know, you're getting dressed how you would for your virtual class, just like if you would have gone into the classroom. I mean, I do have yoga pants on today, but they're like black and appropriate yoga pants that if I stand up, you're I'm not going to be too embarrassed. And then I have a nice sweater on. Annette, great question on the virtual background. So, and now you guys can definitely hear my dog barking in the background. Sorry about that. I think he saw someone walking on the sidewalk to guard our house against. So I think virtual backgrounds are kind of like a personal choice. When I've been on calls with my peers or other people on meetings, I think virtual backgrounds can be kind of distracting because like I find myself trying to peek through the background that's happening, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. However, I also had a coworker the other day that their significant other walked across the background of her video, not realizing that she was on a video call in a meeting and they were not video work appropriate dressed. And so that was pretty embarrassing for her and weird for people on the call. So kind of depends on what you think and who your group is. Bambi said, what's your opinion on having cameras on during training? I've been teaching without due to limited internet access. Yeah, so I prefer to have cameras on, and I've been in some classes. I was in a certificate program earlier this week where I was on like a webinar for 2 days straight, and they forced us to have our webcam on the whole time. And I think it made me pay attention more instead of like scrolling my phone because I knew the facilitator was watching me and that other people were watching me. Um, so I think having your cameras on, if you can, helps to keep people a little more on their toes. So they know they're being watched a little bit and they're less likely to go off and like scroll or do something else and just listen to you in the background. But also if you're having internet struggles or if your learners are having internet struggles, it can really cause a lot of lag, and that can be really distracting too. Tips on sharing the screen. Yes, so my biggest tip for sharing your screen, especially with like a PowerPoint presentation or a file, is that I would totally like get a second monitor, and it doesn't have to be anything big or expensive or anything, but that seriously is a game changer with having a second monitor to use, and you can spread everything out across your desktops, and that makes it so much easier. That's a good question. What do you recommend for how much of a facilitator should you see on the screen? Head, neck up, or chest up? So I do some videography at work as well. So I kind of live by videography rules. And what you want to do is like, I don't know, mid chest up, and you want to avoid floating head mostly. So here, I'm trying to move my computer around, but it's like stuck with all the cords. So like this is a little awkward if you're super close, right? Like this is a little weird, but if you're too far back, like they can't read you as well. And I don't know, like being really far is it takes out some of the detail of being in there. So you want to go from like mid chest to the top of your head is what you want. And that also kind of depends on what you're doing. Like if you have like whiteboards and stuff in the background or something, which I feel like is kind of hard anyway, but or if you are really doing some big concepts with your hands, you might want to leave room for that. But my go-to is always just what you see here, like mid chest to the top of the head. That was a good question.
Katie, I've got one for you.
Perfect.
Okay, so Zoom fatigue. We hear about this a lot. And I'm just wondering, what recommendations do you have for people if you are feeling a little bit of that?
Yeah. I don't have a good solution for that because I also have Zoom fatigue. But I think like really being cognizant of how often you're on virtual meetings. And I think like to me, it feels like I'm on much, much, much more meetings now than I ever was pre-COVID. And I think like that meeting fatigue is very similar. And I notice now that I have a lot more back to back to back meetings that are happening. So I think when you're setting up meetings or if other folks are setting up meetings for you on your calendar, I think it's okay to remind people to give you like a 5 minute buffer or even I have a lot of peers who will schedule in slots in their calendar every day where they don't allow meetings, if at all possible, to give themselves a break and to actually get some work done. I think for your learners, if they're experiencing Zoom fatigue, a lot of these tips are really good things that you can do, like incorporating those breakout discussions or doing an activity that's outside of the Zoom environment, like those Kahoots, where they're engaging in a totally different way can really be beneficial for that.
Okay, another one for you. Do you have experience with evaluations, and what's the best way to get feedback from people that participate in a virtual learning meeting or event or something?
Yeah, so I do have a lot of background in evaluations. I love collecting data and peeling apart data, so I could honestly go on and on about this forever. But it really it really depends on what your learning objectives are, for what you want to get or for what you want your learners rather to get out of the class that you're teaching or the event you're doing. And then you curate your questions according to those learning objectives to give you some really sound data on what you were hoping to get, whether that's engagement or if they retained and learned concepts that you taught. And then there are a lot of different ways and platforms that you can shoot those out. Google Forms is excellent. You can also just, gather some quick surveys using a fillable PDF and have people fill it in. Um, those are all good ways to get those in there. Um, Something I would suggest for learning more about evaluations and how to build them. There's a group out there that's like a pretty standard group for evaluation standards, and it's the Kirkpatrick Partners. Um, it's an evaluation style that goes through a couple different levels, so that would be a good extra reading to do if you're interested in evaluations.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? That's all I see in the chat, so, or in the Q&A box. So, but I have one for you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Katie, from your experience working in this space, like what has changed and what do you see that's really good that is going to push us forward as a work culture and as an education, um, from an education perspective? And then, what do you see as some of the challenges as we navigate this time where people are doing more of this kind of thing?
That's a great question, or two great questions. So, I think something that we're doing really well is that we're learning as facilitators and as teachers and educators. We're in the same exact boat as our students are a lot of the time. We are also spending hours and hours a day on Zoom meetings, just like our students are, whether they're adults or kids. And I think it gives us an interesting perspective on that experience. They're very much going to be feeling the same things you are and want the same things that you want out of the meetings and workshops and classes that you are doing yourself. And I think that gives us a good place to remember what we need and want from a class, especially when we're in a virtual environment like this. We really want to be engaged and have fun in our classes. And I think the virtual environment has really pushed that up to the surface and made that more evident. And I think people are really starting to get good at it and recognize that we need to make learning a lot more fun if we want to keep people interested. Something that I think is holding us back in this space is a lot of our learners and even like our peers and coworkers just don't have great internet access, right? And that's something that's hard to mitigate and hard to work around. Especially during COVID, it's not like we can go set them up at the library with like good, accessible, free internet. Because we can't be in public spaces. So I think that is a really big barrier right now to virtual training. I know today for me, my internet's been really laggy. So I've had to when I was in some meetings this morning, I had to take off my camera because my computer just kept freezing with it on. And I was missing parts of the meeting that I really needed to know. So I think that's a big piece that I don't have an answer for, but I have definitely seen as a problem that we're experiencing.
Yeah. All right, that makes me think of another one. So the question would be, do you have experience or tips on when you have some people that want to meet in person? So you have a small group that's in person, but you also have people that are connecting in virtually. Because I see that probably as we get into the spring will be more and more our reality, where some people are comfortable and others aren't. Or I'm thinking, since NAMI Iowa serves a statewide audience, we always have different people in different places, but we might have a few people at one location. So what tips would you have when you're trying to cater to an audience that's both virtual and in person?
I'm trying to think about it. So what we've done at work, at my full-time job that we do, I haven't had to facilitate a situation like this, but what I've seen folks do, because the company that I work at, we're spread across the country as well. We're kind of everywhere. So what we'll do a lot of the time is we'll have a camera for the room, for the conference room or for the table. And then if anyone else is remote, so people who are still wanting to work from home or participate from home in their personal space, will have their webcams on. So everyone can still interact. And then typically we've also had people up on their computer screens so that they can at least see the chat and interact that way as well, but having their sound off. That's been the best way that I've seen.
Okay. Yep, that sounds good. And since I don't see any other questions, I'm looking again, but I don't see any other from the audience, then this gives me full permission to keep asking you questions.
Absolutely.
And what I'm wondering is, anybody who is in the race and culture session knows that my dog is obnoxious and does not have any interest in Zoom or what I'm trying to do. And he's really, really focused on guarding the house. That's his priority. So I'm just wondering, do you have any tips for dog owners that have loud dogs, and what can I do about this? How can I teach him about Zoom and that my paycheck is dependent on successful work, and he is not a good, considerate coworker?
Yeah, so my dog's also not a considerate coworker, so I totally understand. My dog thinks that it is his duty and honor to bark as loud as possible at the breeze that blows by the house throughout the entire day. So I just a lot of the times I just remind people when I get on calls that like he's typically like more barky at different times of the day. So I like to remind people like, hey, my dog's probably gonna bark. I just want you to know. I might like have to go on mute at some point, and I like usually have mute button at the ready as well.
Yeah.
But what I do a lot of the times, for situations where I know he's going to go crazy is I will close my office door. You can kind of see a tour of my space, sort of. I will try to close that, and my dog's a German Shepherd mix, so he's pretty strong and big, and he'll punch that door open if it doesn't latch. Um, but if I can get that door closed, that helps a lot, and he will kind of calm down once he sees that door closed, and he'll just go and sit
Mhm.
outside. That's been the best that I can do. Or using like a distraction treat, like a Kong,
Okay.
where they really have to work at like getting the treat out, and keeps them like really preoccupied for a while. That's worked really well in the past for me too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. My dog, I have a mail slot, and so he's just listening for when the mailman comes, and then I think he thinks the mail is invading the house. And
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
don't even know if a Kong with peanut butter would be enough to keep him from the whole mail issue, but it would certainly be worth a try.
Yeah, yeah, it might be worth it to like put a note on the mailbox that says like, please put my mail in this box during this
No,
time
I've
instead of
seriously
the
thought
slot.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know people I've worked with who also have like kids who come in on them all the time. I have one coworker who she has a high school student, and he thinks it's so funny to pop in through her virtual background and wave in the meeting. And like she doesn't have a space where she can get away from him, but I've seen other coworkers where they've like put signs on their door that says like, do not come in, I'm working. Or I have a friend, we have headsets that kind of light up. Well, this one's not right now, but I think it's because I'm not using the actual like connector piece. I've just got it plugged in through the headphone jack. But these will light up red when we're on a meeting and it's an
Okay.
active call. And so like I've had friends teach their kids that if the headset's red, like that means stop, don't come in. And that doesn't necessarily work with dogs, but some
Yep.
ideas of what other folks can do if you're having loud kid situations too.
Yep. Yep. Terry comments here that she enjoys hearing and seeing the dogs. Thank you, Terry. And she wants to know, where's the line between distraction and something that makes it more interesting?
Yeah, I think dogs sometimes, or even like kids popping in or spouses, can be kind of fun and kind of shake up that Zoom fatigue a little bit. I think something to be cognizant about is how long that distraction goes on. So if it's
Hmm.
just like a minute or two at the top of a meeting or in the middle of a long meeting during like a break or something, I think that's okay. But once that starts taking up like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, because I've experienced those too, where the bulk of the meeting becomes like, ooh, what's your dog doing now type meetings. And I think that's where that line starts to become a distraction.
Hmm. Yep. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, Katie. So thank
Okay.
you for being with us today. We appreciate your tips and tricks and letting us pick your brain on this topic.
Absolutely. I hope everyone has a really great rest of your conference and a great Thanksgiving.
To everyone that's attending the last session, the final plenary is at 4 o'clock. So please join us back for that. Thanks, everybody.